I'm Yurisa. I'm currently working as a clinical research fellow, and I previously worked in the A&E as a registrar. I'm joined by my co-host and my co-founder of Medicine the Essentials, Dr. Natalie Howard, who is currently an anesthetics trainee. So just in terms of the aim of today, we aim to provide you with an overview of the CT1 or ST1 application process for specialty training. Before we begin, we just have a few housekeeping rules. So firstly, burning questions are welcome throughout the talk, but we ask that you limit this to the chat. And please, can you all mute your mics right now, as this can be quite distracting. And then at the end, we will have a dedicated Q&A session. So if you do have other questions, you can keep them for the end. Or if you worried you forget them, just put them in the chat. We will also be recording, like Natalie said, and we also just ask that you please assist us with feedback. And if you complete the feedback, which I will post in the chat now, the link to the feedback. If you complete this feedback, we will also allow you access to future talks, which might include a mock interview session. Okay, so before I go into the next slide, I'm just going to switch my camera off and then we'll carry on. Okay, next slide. So just an overview in terms of the contents, which I'll also post into the chat. Just posting this into the chat now, so you have access to it throughout the talk. So in terms of an overview of what we'll be discussing, we'll start with the application process timeline. Then we'll go through the actual application and the use of Oriel. We'll then cover selection, the MSRA exams, as well as self-assessments. We'll then go through interviews, offers, some of the specialties in detail, finally tips, and then the Q&A section. Next slide. So we just wanted to give you a disclaimer. We're both junior doctors in the NHS. So it's important to note that we aren't from the HEE. We have no affiliation with them. So we've just tried our best to collate all the information we could gather. So this information could be subject to change. It could change tomorrow. It could change next week. So please try and visit the HEE website and keep up to date with any changes. Also visit the specialty website and or applicant handbook, which is on the various specialty websites. Next slide. And so the sources we've used to create this webinar were firstly, Dr. Howard or Natalie attended the HEE webinar, which was quite useful. And we also visited the respective specialty websites, and then it's just also speculation based on previous experiences. Next. So just to go back to the contents, just a reminder, this is what we'll be covering. Okay, next slide. So we'll start with the overview. So we have a variety of different people attending in the audience tonight. Some of you are F2s, some of you are F1s. There are also a few medical students who signed up and might be attending, as well as other SHOs. So it's just a reminder to start early and start thinking early about which specialty you'd like to apply to. And then remember that some of these COVID specific changes might be here to stay. So this might be the way the application process for the foreseeable future. And just to remember that, or as I've mentioned before, everything is evolving so rapidly. So the content we cover today might change tomorrow. So just keep up to date with what the HEE says. Other sources of information you should access, you could use this link to the specialty training and the HEE site. And then there you will find the 2019 person specifications. You'll also find the vacancy information, competition ratios, applicant guides, and links to the individual specialty recruitment pages. Next slide. So just an overview of the application process for 2020 2021, well, technically to start in 2022. Everything is online, so that's really important to note. And they've made contingency plans in case due to the COVID disruption. So there's basically a plan A and plan B. And this plan A and plan B is based on each specialty. So you have to look up the plan A for, say, orthopedics, and it will be different to that of IMT. There's a plan A for each specialty, and then there's also plan B. And then if plan A and plan B fall through, it's important to note that there is really no plan C. So if that happens, they'll likely just stick with plan B, and there might be no further recruitment after that. It's also important to note that there are fewer interviews available this year, so there will be a lot less people shortlisted and a lot less interviews. This is just because of the capacity of interviewers to interview. I think there's a the maximum number they can do in a day in comparison with the face-to-face interviews. So there are fewer spaces, fewer interviews available, fewer places available. So just keep this in mind. So it is likely to be more competitive this year. Another important note is that HE have advised that all evidence for self-assessment needs verification. So just remember that if you are doing a self-assessment, make sure you have all the relevant documentation to back up the score you allocate to yourself. Next slide. So just an overview of the timeline of the recruitment activity. So firstly, adverts appeared on between the 2nd and 5th of November. The application window is the 5th. Actually, no, adverts just appeared on the 2nd. Yeah. The application window is the 5th of November, which just passed, to the 1st of December. So those are important dates to jot down because we were already getting quite close to December. The interview window will be from the 4th of January until the 16th of April. Initial offers will be made by 5 p.m. on the 19th of April. And then the holding deadline will be on the 28th of April. And remember that you have 48 hours in which to accept or reject an offer. And then the upgrade deadline is the 30th of April. Next slide. So now we're going to move on to the actual application. So in terms of applying, subject to the eligibility criteria, so this is basically referring to the person specifications for each specialty. If you fit this person specification, you can apply to as many specialties as you would like. If you're comfortable with, if you get the offers, if you're comfortable with attending the interviews, remember that you can just decline the interviews if you've applied to a few. All applications are through Oriel. Next slide. And just in terms of Oriel this year, there's a completely new version of Oriel which you will need to register for. It has nothing to do with the 2020 Oriel version. So you need to go to this link and sign up for the new version, register and add your personal details. And I'd advise you to do this early. Slide. So step 1 is basically register with Oriel, insert or populate Oriel with your basic demographics, and do this as soon as possible. Next. So step 2 is search for your specialty. So there's a nice search function under the advanced search criteria. So where it says I'm applying for, you can search for internal, and then it should bring up internal medicine training, for example. And then, yeah, you don't have to select a specific area here. Okay, next slide. So step 3 is to actually fill in the online application form, which consists of 4 parts generally for all of the applications. Part 1 is your employment history. Part 2 consists of references, training history, fitness to practice, eligibility, and qualifications. Part 3 consists of white space. So it's basically just all those big blank text boxes you need to populate with why you are committed to the specialty, for example. And then part 4 is self-assessment. Next slide. So this is the white space I was talking about. So you will just need to just bear in mind that there is a word limit. So keep it concise and just try and make your most important achievements, perhaps put those first and just keep it quite short and sweet. We will go through all of this in a bit more detail later on in the talk. Next slide. And then moving on to the self-assessment. So this is basically where you'll be scoring yourself. I'll show you this in the next slide. So basically, we'll also go into this in more detail later on in the talk. But for the self-assessment, you need to select the box which is most appropriate to you. And bear in mind that you shouldn't overscore yourself because this could lead to your application being deemed invalid and or a case of GMC probity. So make sure that if you score yourself, for example, awarded a national prize related to medicine, make sure that that certificate or that evidence says that your name and surname, so-and-so was awarded a national prize in medicine or something related to medicine. So also another example would be, say you have a high achievement award for your primary medical qualification, which was awarded to no more than the top 15%. That certificate needs to say that only the top 15% received this award. Otherwise, that's basically overscoring, if I can use those as examples. Next slide. Okay, so now we're moving on to selection, which Natalie will do.
Hello, sorry, my computer's being a bit annoying. So I'm going to talk to you about how selection works. I'll cover long listing, shortlisting very, very briefly. I'm going to go into the MSRA in a lot more detail. I know that not everybody is taking it, but for lots of people it is new. And then I'll go over the self-assessment, if my computer works. Great. So long listing is just checking whether or not you're eligible generally, and most people will be long listed and that will be fine. Shortlisting is saying whether or not you qualify for the next round. So each specialty is doing their own thing. They are deciding whether it depends on your MSRA results, if that's what you're taking, your self-assessment or your white space. And shortlisting is subject to change. So for example, at the moment, Anaesthetics is saying they are going to try not to shortlist, but the likelihood is that they will require to because there will be lots of applicants. But I'll tell you more about that later. In terms of the MSRA, the multi-specialty recruitment assessment, it assesses your knowledge at an F2 level only. So don't worry about knowing more than a foundation doctor needs to know. A really good document to look at is the MSRA blueprint, which you can just search online. And there are two parts to the MSRA. There is the professional dilemma part, which is like a situational judgment test that all of you would have taken at the end of medical school. There are 50 questions in this section, 8 of which are pilot questions. So if you come across a question that you think is really strange, don't worry, it is probably the pilot one. And you have 95 minutes per question. And they can be really, really long questions to read. So it sounds like a long time, but it might not be. The second part is your clinical problem part. There are 97 questions, 11 of which are pilot questions. Again, if there's an odd question, it might be a pilot question. Don't think about it too much and move on. And you've got 75 minutes for that. And then on the right is the list of specialties that it's being used in. A few of these specialties are using it for the first time. So a lot of you are suddenly finding out that you need to take this. So I'm going to talk about the professional dilemma and the clinical problems section separately. So the professional dilemma section assesses 3 main domains: professional integrity, coping with pressure, and empathy and sensitivity. And the reason that I mentioned this to you rather than telling you to look it up is because I've had a look at a few of the past questions, and looking through the details of these domains actually makes it a lot easier to answer a question. So for example, this is what you have under professional integrity. I'm not going to read it out, but I'll give you guys a minute. This is all in the MSRA blueprint document that I mentioned. The coping with pressure section. And the empathy and sensitivity section. So having had a look at some of the example questions, the ones that are slightly tricky, you can just think, oh, which of these sections is it trying to make sure that I can demonstrate? And that makes it a lot easier to answer the question. Importantly, there is no negative marking at all, not in the professional dilemma or the clinical problem section. So answer everything. They've also stated that they adopt a near-miss approach to marking. They don't go into any more detail than that, but I speculate that it's similar to the SJT marking, where, for example, if by some miracle the answer to a question is A, B, C, D, E, and you put A, B, D, C, E, you'll probably still score quite highly. So if you're not sure what to do, just put what you think is the top, put what you think is the bottom, and then put the others in the middle. There are two types of questions in the professional dilemma section. There is the order of these following things, or there is pick 3 of these things to go together. Pay particular attention to which kind of question it is and also the stem. So is it asking you to rank the appropriateness of your actions or the order of the actions? This really should make a difference to how you're answering something, because something might be what you would do first, but probably not the most appropriate response altogether. And then when you do the pick 3, think about the 3 things that work closely together and don't double up on your answer. So for example, if you've made a mistake and the options are apologize to the patient, say sorry to the patient, direct the patient to PALS, plus other answers, don't pick apologize and say sorry. It's the same thing. You're not going to get the right marks. So keep that in mind. Then you've got the clinical problem section. It's roughly 50-50 extended matching questions and single best answer. These are the 12 topics and it's roughly balanced. I've had a look at some past papers. It's not much beyond what you would expect in a medical school final year paper. Some of them can be trickier than others, but it's not terrible. Given that you guys have done medical school exams closer than I have, you'd probably do better than I would. These are the 5 domains they test you on: investigations, diagnoses, emergencies, prescribing, and management, which isn't prescribing. Okay. In terms of the timeline, so I've stolen this from the GP recruitment organization website. I presume that it's the same for every other specialty. I've checked with a few specialties and it seems to be the same. You'll get an email inviting you to sit the MSRA by the 5th of January. You've got a window of time to sit it, and then you should get your results by the 4th of March. In terms of other things to think about, after your application, you'll get the email from the GP recruitment organization. You've got to book via Pearson VUE, a lot of which requires you to bring some kind of ID with you, usually a passport or a driving license. If you are shielding or self-isolating, you do have the option to sit it at home. In terms of practice, there are so many example questions available online, and there's also practice for Pearson VUE online. So if you go to the Pearson VUE website, which I've got a link to, you can actually practice what it looks like on the screen, which is nice, so you're not surprised. In terms of potential challenges, so I asked HEE what they're going to do if Pearson VUE closes. They are currently discussing with Pearson VUE to ensure that the test centres stay open, but I presume that if there are further issues, they will allow more people to sit it at home. The other thing is that the technology is your responsibility. So if you decide to do it at home, you need to make sure that your Wi-Fi works. If you've booked a test and you happen to be unwell or isolating on the day of test, unfortunately, HEE can't really do much about that, and it sucks, really. These I'm going to post in the chat in a little bit. It's some good websites I found that covered the MSRA generally. The one at the bottom is in bold because I thought it was quite a nice overview. I will post them in the chat, so don't worry. In terms of scoring, so it's normalized around a mean of 250 with a standard deviation, and then you get banded, and then depending on your banding, you get a score. and I will post the Pearson VUE demo test link as well. So for the clinical problem solving test, this is an example of how the banding works. So as you can see, round about the middle is the score, roughly 250. And again, it's similar in the professional dilemmas test, round about the middle is the score, 250. I think these results were from 2016, but they haven't changed much since because of the normalization. These are some pretty good examples of places that you can find past questions. Some of them are free. I think MediBuddy is free, and some of them are not, but they're all pretty good resources. I haven't tested all of them out, so some of this is word of mouth. Just give you guys a second in case you want to write these down. Okay. So we've covered the MSRA in terms of how it might be used for selection. So I'll talk to you a bit more about the selection criteria, self-assessment, and person specification. So the selection criteria is just a list of achievements that each specialty puts out. The self-assessment is you marking yourself against those selection criteria. You saying, I've looked at the selection criteria, and in this part, I think I get this many marks because I've done so what, whatever it is that you've done. The person specification is similar to the selection criteria, but it's not exactly the same thing. It's not a list of achievements, it's kind of more of a list of desirable qualities. And then in terms of changes this year, so all selection criteria have been reviewed in light of COVID. Lots of named courses and exams have been removed because they've been cancelled, so people can't go to them. We've been told verbally that if you've been redeployed away from an important post, it will be taken into account in interview, but I'm not sure how this is. So this is me comparing selection criteria to the person specification. I've kind of color coded it, so you can see that they're really similar, except the selection criteria specified, oh, I've done X, Y, Z, whereas the person specification says, oh, I have these skills. And the person specification is really important, so have a look at it when you decide what you want to apply to. As Eurissa mentioned, colleges have been instructed to verify self-assessments in some way. So some colleges are verifying all of the self-assessments, whereas other colleges are just auditing a proportion of them. In terms of your evidence, so it's unclear to me at the moment how all specialties are ensuring evidence uploads are reviewed. Some of them seem to be uploaded on Oriel, whereas with other specialties, they're going to give you some kind of link to a portal in which you upload your evidence. When you upload it, you tag it, and each specialty determines whatever its own tags are. Once the deadline passes, you can't submit any further evidence. One of the reasons I put that there is because you need to pay close attention to what the selection criteria says. Some will say you have to achieve this by time of interview, whereas others will say you have to achieve this by time of appointment into your new post. So if you know you're going to be presenting something nationally, but not for a few months, you might be able to get those extra points for it. And then when the self-assessment is audited, the assessors can modify your score. So a lot of specialties are asking that you only upload the evidence for your top score. So for example, if you've presented something regionally and you've presented something internationally, they only want you to post what you've presented internationally. As I mentioned, you'll get an invitation at some point to an upload portal. I raised with HEE that there's going to be some concern about only uploading evidence for your top score because the assessors can look at it and downgrade your score. So you might go from a potential 8 to a 0. Their advice is to strike a balance. There are people that have to sit down and review your evidence, and there's a limited amount of time that these people have. So make your scores obvious to them. If you do decide to upload evidence for more than just your top score, don't overdo it. Make sure to strike a reasonable balance. And IMT specifically acknowledges that there's going to be more difficulty than usual with your self-assessment this year. And that was pretty much all they said. And again, make sure you look at the selection criteria and note whether they want you to state that you've achieved something either by the time that you apply, or by the time you interview, or by the time you start the job. So this is the IMT website, which specifically says in the second paragraph, whilst candidates are encouraged to use the scoring system to accurately represent their achievements, you must be able to justify your selection and provide evidence if required. So don't obviously overclaim anything, as you should not. You can be investigated and you can be referred to the GMC. This rarely happens, but it is possible. Okay, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about interview. So interviews are all single panel. Historically, you would go to an interview center, you would do your first station, which for example could be a portfolio station. You sit in front of 2 people, you talk, and then you move into another room and talk to 2 new people about a clinical scenario. So you've got more than one panel. However, at the moment, because of technology, it's just single panel. So you are in front of the same people for the whole interview. At least one of these people must be a consultant. And HEE have advised the colleges to have a minimum of 2 interviewers, but this can be reduced to 1 if there is difficulty with COVID. They've also mentioned that there's going to be some quality assurance by lay representatives. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that, but I would assume that some people might have a random 3rd person watching the interview. Don't be thrown off by them. The other thing to mention is that the interviewers can seem really, really stern. They're instructed very strictly not to show any bias and not to show too much emotion. So this can come across as quite jarring. But take a deep breath, smile, and just talk about how amazing you are. In terms of practicalities, I've written bring your passport or driving license. I mean, have it with you, because they might want you to show it at your interview on the screen. Obviously, check your emails, check the specialty website for anything specific that they want from you. Make sure your technology works. Again, that is your responsibility. I would also block out the whole day for your interview if you can. You don't know what delays people are going to have. You don't know what glitches there are going to be. You guys probably already know this, but think about the setting, think about your background, think about the background noise, dress as though you're going to interview. You might also be asked to pick up the camera and show them around the room to make sure that you're not reading things off a piece of paper, or there aren't people in the room coaching you or something weird like that. These are books that are decent for interviews. I know one of them is for medical school, but I genuinely had a flick through that and it was fairly useful. They're both by ISC Medical and they're both very similar. I don't work for them, so you can probably get them from the library for free if you really wanted, but that was the one that I used. So on that note, to course or not to course, courses for interviews can be really, really expensive. The main thing I want to get across to you guys is the importance of practicing. There are so many people that go into interview that don't practice basic answers of questions that they know they're going to be asked. They think that they know how to answer them, but when you're nervous, it's really difficult. So just make sure that you practice. We are probably going to be running an interview course at some point that Urissa will tell you more about. Offers, I think, Urissa, were you going to do this bit?
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, so back to me. So in terms of offers, how they work is you have 48 hours only with which to respond to an offer. If you don't respond within the 48 hours, you will be deemed to have declined the offer. So if you decline, then it means that you will receive no further offers from that particular specialty, but you will continue to receive offers from other specialties. Also remember that you can only accept one offer from any specialty. So really think carefully before you accept an offer. It should be something that you've thought about, a specialty that you really are ready to commit the rest of your life in. And then there is also the option to upgrade. And what upgrading means is, for example, if you have chosen a hospital, well, if your first hospital isn't one that you ranked very highly, and if you receive the option to upgrade, then automatically the system will just pick one of your higher chosen hospitals. So I'll give you an example. So if you got Imperial College Trust or something like that, and then you didn't want it for some reason and you ranked the Royal Free higher, then you would, if you chose the option to upgrade, you could be upgraded to the Royal Free. But also remember that you could be upgraded to any of the other options you put above that. So just make sure that when you are listing the order of your the hospitals you'd like, make sure that you really do like those hospitals, you know about working there, and you would be happy to work at any of them. In terms of holding, you can also only hold one offer at a time. So also keep this in mind. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this one. So basically, I've already mentioned most of this, but rank your preferences carefully. Make sure they're everything you want and only what you want. Don't rank anything quite high up if you really don't like, you really wouldn't want to work at that trust or hospital. Remember that there's no way to play the system, and you also shouldn't try and be selfish and try and do things like try and holding more than one offer, because you'll just not be able to, and then you'll be the one that loses out. You can also download a copy of your preferences once you have submitted these. Yeah, next slide. So now we'll carry on with looking at some of the specialties in more detail. This is just a summary of all the specialties we'll cover. So we'll cover medicine or IMT, GP training, psychiatry, anesthetics, surgery, radiology, and pediatrics. You can also find the summaries for each of these specialties as well as other ones via this link, which will also pop in the chat. I think I've already put it in the chat. Next slide. So in terms of medicine or IMT, there is, as we've mentioned, for all the specialties, a plan A and plan B. For medicine's plan A, it consists of the self-assessment, which is used to shortlist for the interview. Remember that some applicants at random will be audited in plan A. So make sure that you have all your evidence readily available. And if you don't have the evidence, don't say you've attained that achievement or you've achieved something, okay? In terms of the interviews are used for ranking. So that's in terms of your ranking, which determines which hospital you get. And they're basically 4 domains, and the interview will last, according to the website, approximately 30 to 40 minutes virtually. In terms of plan B, in plan B, there are no interviews and all candidates have to upload evidence. So it's really important that you have all that evidence saved in one folder because like we've mentioned before, this could change rapidly and you might next week be asked to change to plan B. So make sure you have all your evidence with you. This evidence upload will require consultant verification. And then they will receive your score, they will look at your score and they could adjust or keep your score the same. There will also be a period to allow for disputes. So if you think that they unfairly reduced your score, you could probably dispute that. There is also a minimum score required for plan B because obviously they won't be able to invite everyone based on the evidence upload for a job, for an IMT post. And then they will also, in plan B, review those, the white space areas, which includes your evidence of your commitment to specialty and the person specification. Next slide. So in terms of the medicine interview, there are 4 main stations, which are the clinical scenario, ethical scenario, suitability and commitment to IMT, and then finally application and training. Communication skills is assessed throughout, and then the clinical scenario, for the clinical scenario, there are actually 2 separate stations, if you'd like to call it that. One will include investigations and diagnosis, and the second station will be management and communication. So they're basically 6 areas of assessment, which you'll be scored on. So yeah, 6 areas of assessment, 2 interviewers, one of which is a consultant, and then each of these 6 areas is scored out of 5 to give you a total score of 60. It is important to note that each area has a different weighting, and we will come to this in 2 slides. And it's also very important to note that you can score, if you score too lowly or too poorly, you might not be appointable. Next slide. So just in terms of the rating at the assessment, if you score a score of 1 for any of the sections, you will automatically be considered unappointable. And then if you score a score of 2 in 2 or more areas, you will also be deemed unappointable. So you should basically aim for the green area. Actually, just aim for 5s. In terms of the scoring system, so poor, as like I said before, is unappointable. 2 highlights an area for concern. So you're likely not at the level of an F2, which is not what they want. 3, 4, and 5 is what you should aim for. They're at the level of an F2, and then 5 is an excellent candidate who is at the level of an IMT trainee. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, each of the domains has a weighting. So for example, interviewer 1 will give you a score out of 5, and then interviewer 2 will also give you a score out of 5. This score out of 10 will then be multiplied by 1.2, which is its weighting, to give you a maximum score out of 12. So for example, the clinical scenario with investigations and diagnosis counts more than the management or communication. But I don't think you should really focus on which counts more. Just try and do your best at all of them. But it's just the way they do it. And then ethics, suitability and commitment, and application and training all are out of 16. And then the communication mark, which is assessed throughout the 4 questions, is out of 12. For GP training and psychiatry, for those of you who are looking to apply for them, you're quite lucky, I think, because you will only, well, you get a job based solely on your MSRA score. So if you score really highly in your MSRA, you will automatically receive a GP and or psychiatry job. Remember, you can only pick one. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the other specialties, partially because I'm an anaesthetics trainee. So this has changed a lot for anyone applying for anaesthetics. There is no unverified self-scoring at all, which means that there is no proper self-assessment. Their plan A, so the plan that they're doing at the moment, is that your MSRA counts for 15% of your total ranking score, and it's split halfway between the professional dilemmas and the clinical problem solving. If needed, so if there are too many applicants for the interview, the MSRA score is also going to be used to shortlist for interview. After this, you get your interview, which will count for 85% of your final ranking mark. There are 2 panel members. It's going to be approximately 30 minutes. 10 minutes of this is going to be portfolio questions. The other 20 minutes will be other. Plan B is the same as Plan A, except there's only going to be 1 panel member. The thing that I wanted to bring up here is that we had a portfolio station pre-COVID. And in this station, you had 10 minutes to go through your full portfolio. I'm speculating that it's going to be fairly similar in that they're going to ask you broad questions and try to mark you in a similar way to how they used to mark the portfolio stations. You're not meant to be presenting evidence, so you're not going to show them what you've done, but you can talk about it. So make sure that you're able to talk about each section of your portfolio, almost like a monologue, but try to make it interesting. In terms of surgery, you've got your plan A and plan B. The plan A is shortlisting via unverified self-assessment. So they've stated that this is what they used to do pre-COVID, so there's no reason why they shouldn't do unverified self-assessment now. What they're going to do is everybody who makes the cutoff for interview, as well as the 15% of people below who don't make the cutoff, will have evidence verified at a later date, presumably to make sure that people that have been downgraded and now no longer get to have an interview are removed, whereas people who actually would have gotten an interview were then reconsidered, but I'm not sure. And then in terms of your score, a third of it is your verified self-assessment, and the rest of it's an interview, which is 10 minutes long. Plan B is as above, but it's just the self-assessment, rather the verified self-assessment. There is no interview. In terms of radiology, it is MSRA shortlisting, which makes up a third of your total score. There is also a self-assessment score, which is verified prior to the interview, and you've got an interview which lasts 10 minutes. The 55 top scorers of the MSRA don't have to do an interview, they are appointed a job. Plan B is that the MSRA takes up 50% of the score and the self-assessment takes up the other 50%. Paediatrics, so their plan A is shortlisting via the MSRA, which makes up 25% of the score, and via the white space, which makes up another 25%. And then the interview, which is 25 minutes, makes up 50%. Their plan B means no interview. I want to give you guys some tips based on what I did at interview, which worked. Generally, the likelihood is that little will change. I can't see how they would rewrite a full interview just because COVID has happened and now it's online. They're going to be generally assessing the same kind of things. So remember, it's your time to shine. It's a really, really stressful situation. So take a deep breath. Remember, it is really competitive this year. So if nothing else, this is really, really good practice. Make sure that you practice with your friends, with your family, with your dog. Just practice answering those questions. Pay very, very close attention to the person specification. This is important when you're writing your white space answers, especially if that might be or is used in any way in giving you your score. And it will also help you practice verbally saying those things so you can practice answering the interview questions. Make things really, really easy for the panels. So the panels that are reviewing any white space questions and also the panels that interview. So say things like, oh, I was the leader, I was the main contributor, or it was national, international, regional. Just make it really, really obvious for them. If you're asked to reflect on something, there are loads of reflection cycles online that you can have a look at. There are loads of little mnemonics that help you answer questions in interview if you're struggling. My last point here was to try to gauge interview interest in any interview practice. So I'm a CT2 in anaesthetics. I don't have any specific interview training, but I did do really well. And I think a lot of this is just in practicing. If you're interested in doing some interview practice, please do the feedback form. And then at the end of it, where it says other, put that you're interested in interview practice, just so we know. So that's it. We're going to do a Q&A, and please again do the feedback. The feedback link is in the chat. Okay. And feel free to unmute yourselves if you want.
I've just posted the feedback link in the chat again. So
okay, any questions, anyone?
If you don't feel like talking, you could just put it in the chat.
Hello, my name is Serena, I'm an FY2, and I was just wondering, in regards to the MSRA, in regards to the clinical part, so not the SGT, but the clinical part. So why is it that they give so much time for the SGT questions? So they give like 95 minutes for 75 questions or so, whilst for the clinical scenarios, it's vice versa. And I was just wondering, why is this discrepancy? Because there's not even a minute per question.
Yeah, so I think there's probably two reasons for that. And again, this is speculation. One is that the professional dilemma is similar to a situational judgment test. There is a lot of text to read, a lot of text to get through, not just in the question, but in the answer as well. So that's 1 minute per question, and that's still tight on time. Don't think that's a long time, it's still tight on time. In terms of the clinical problems, if you think about your medical school exams, you probably had about a minute per question. And these questions are roughly the same level as medical school exams, and they want to put pressure on you. So a lot of it is going to be pattern recognition. So I would recommend doing loads and loads of practice. But I think you guys can all do it. If you're here, you're capable. And it's just a matter of practice.
Lovely, thank you.
A couple of people have posted questions in the chat. Hang on, I'm computer incompetent. How fluid is it changing between specialties? So if you start with medicine and after a year you decide you don't want to continue, how would reapplying work / is it advisable? So you can apply for something else if you've already started a training program. In fact, I know a couple of people that are doing that. It just involves completing an application form on Oriel. It's difficult to say how fluid it is, because when you go to interview and you start talking about your work history and your experience, you'll have to really justify why you want to change specialties. It's completely doable, but I would say you have to have a pretty strong reason.
And I think they might, in some cases, they might count, say, for example, you're doing IMT, but you're doing the acute medicine section. Oh, that's ACCS, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think if you're doing ACCS acute med, it's very easy to go into IMT year 2, because I think it's quite transferable. You do similar types of rotations, but then changing specialties, you know, like say, I'm not sure if that's what you meant, whether that year will count towards anything else. I think it depends on the specialty, but I know between IMT you can, if you're doing ACCS acute med, you can change to IMT year 2. But I think for other ones, you might just have to reapply all over again. But then again, like Natalie said, you have to really show why you're committed to the second specialty you've decided to now do when you've already had a job in the first one, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Una's asked, do you have any info about A&E training and their plan A and plan B? So I've just looked at that link that I think Eurissa's posted in the chat. And for emergency medicine, they've written that everyone sits the MSRA score, which is MSRA test, which is used for shortlisting. There is a 30-minute interview. The ranking is based on both the interview and the MSRA score. That is their plan A. Their plan B is just MSRA score. If you're not sure what your specialty is doing, so you can check that link that we've posted. You can search for the specialty and the words applicant guide, and it will say it on there. What else have we got? Fewer jobs in general, as well as fewer interviews. So I haven't looked up exactly how many fewer jobs there will be, but based on how many anaesthetic jobs were available when I applied versus how many are currently available, it's about half to a third of the amount. It's difficult to know what impact that's going to have. I think a lot of people might be taking years out and doing fellow jobs because it will be more competitive, and because a lot of people have lost the option to travel and take the F3 that they wanted to take. But I think if you've got the opportunity, you might as well go through the application process, as harrowing as it is, to get rid of those jitters and just to see what it's like. So it's more competitive this year because there are fewer interviews available, which means that you need to, if you have shortlisting criteria, perform well in terms of their shortlisting.
And the reason, so the reason for the fewer interviews is because everything is done online, and I think it's just because of the number of, with all the technical problems, etc., the number of interviews they can schedule in a day, and also just with all the COVID restrictions, the number of interviewers they can have in one room and the number they can have in general.
Someone's also messaged me to ask, if you underscore yourself in the self-assessment, but then it's reviewed, could they mark score if they think you deserve it? The answer is yes, they can mark you up, but I would not risk that. If there is a decent amount of evidence saying that you could be getting a higher score, I would go for it. It's a really hard balance to strike, because you don't want to be told that you've overscored yourself. But of all the years to be confident in your abilities, I would say that this is the year. Get as much evidence as you can, get it early, and be confident in what you're scoring yourself.
So Tanya has asked, what additional things are considered in the application and interview process for an academic clinical fellowship? how competitive is it? So I've recently asked one of the consultants about this, and they've told me the answer was it is extremely competitive. So you need to have published, you need to have seriously good evidence of why you're suitable for the fellowship. And the interviews are really tough. They really grow you. If you want to, if it's something you're thinking about, just apply and see how it goes. But I'd make sure that you have enough evidence for why you want to go into an fully academic setting. I think it's 25 to 75, 75 to 25. So 25% academic and 75% clinical. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Make sure you do the feedback, guys. We can't improve without it.
Sorry, Miranda, I hope that we answered why it's more competitive. I think it's just because of the limited number of interviews they can host. That just makes it more competitive.
And also fewer places are actually available.
Yeah.
Do you know much about GP recruitment? Seems like it's going to be very competitive. Where can I look for information in terms of how many places are available? So I'll go back to the first slide, which I'm really computer illiterate. Hang on, guys. One of our first slides has information that you can have a look at the competitiveness at this one here. Can you guys see that? Urissa, can you see it? Specialty training.
Yep.
Okay. So that website there has some information about competition ratios. But if you're unsure of anything about a particular specialty, just go online and search for specialty name applicant guide. So GP applicant guide or GP recruitment office, and they'll have the specific information. I will say that GP is probably going to be more competitive than usual because people might just apply because they're sitting for the MSRA. So if they get a good score, they might get a good GP job and take it because they're happy with doing GP. So it's difficult. It's probably going to be more competitive, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply.
I agree. I think everyone is just going to, if you're doing the MSRA, I have a feeling that most people will just apply for all the specialties who even consider MSRA in some way.
Yeah, that's what I would do. Someone's asked, can we score the courses that are booked after the interview timeline? So you have to look really carefully at the specialty selection criteria. Their website or their application will say whether or not you have to achieve this by the time of interview or by the time of the appointment to your new job. So each specialty will say differently as to whether or not things count if you've not completed them by the time of the interview.
Exactly. And I know, just for example, IMT, you have to have everything you have to have done by the time the application is submitted. So for IMT, you can't submit, say you're attending a course on the 23rd of December, you can't submit that.
The MSRA is free. I should have had that in the PowerPoint, sorry. There's no charge, but you have to pay for travel, accommodation, that sort of thing if you need that. Is it possible to defer GP application this year? I actually don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if anybody else has had a look at the application.
I think you can defer for any of them because they do ask you, can you defer would you like to defer your start date? It's one of the questions.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we'll give you guys another minute in case anyone thinks of any questions. Oh, someone's asked, how long would you suggest to prepare for the MSRA? I think everyone's different and everyone works differently. I would say rather than thinking about how long you have to prepare for, I would say start early and see how you do at the moment. Mm-hmm. If you're scoring really highly and you're doing well, then fine, you can prepare less.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of this stuff is start early. Because remember, it might be part of your shortlisting and then you've got to start preparing for interview. Or it might be part of your shortlisting and your overall ranking. I do some past papers and do some questions online and see how you do and then take it from there. Again, we're going to post this online so you can send the link to your friends in case they want this information.
So yeah, we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel, Medicine the Essentials. So if you want to share with others, like and subscribe.
Yeah. Eurus, I don't know if you've got any other advice for how long you would prepare for the MSRA?
Well, I haven't done it myself, but what I've heard from friends who've done it and done really well, they basically just did the question banks. I think some of them did past medicine. There's also past tests, like you mentioned. And I think past medicine's quite reasonably priced, like £40. And it expires after your exam, which is really good. Another nice thing is that if you've I have no affiliation with past medicine, let me just say that. It's just something that I have used in the past. But they also are quite kind in that if your exam is deferred or anything happens, they will extend your membership for free.
Yeah. Someone's asked, re-IMT, when would Plan B come into force? So for every specialty, if there is any issue, I'm sorry, this was said at the beginning, so it was quite a while ago, you might have missed it. Let me find the slide first. There we go. So every specialty picks their own Plan A and their own Plan B. Plan A is what they're planning to do at the moment. Plan B is if COVID makes things even more difficult. If COVID's making things more difficult so that Plan A is no longer deliverable, 4 nations, as in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, get together and discuss for that specific specialty whether or not they move to Plan B. So you'd have to stay up to date on their recruitment website. So it would probably take a lot to move from Plan A to Plan B. And if there are further issues, meaning that they can't even do their Plan B, there is no Plan C, and there's just not going to be any further recruitment from that specialty. And I think part of that is to ensure that whatever happens, their Plan B should be deliverable, which is why a lot of Plan Bs are, oh, we'll just go off the MSRA score, or we'll just go off the self-assessment score. I wouldn't worry too much about things moving because all of the Plan As, I'm going to kick myself for saying this, but all of the Plan As seem fairly robust and COVID proof.
They do. Another question said, how late can you defer, and is it possible for IMT like a year? I think if you're considering deferring IMT for a year, don't apply this year, apply the following year.
Yeah.
Because what would the point be then?
Guess you might desperately want to see what the application's like. But
maybe, but then also you're taking up a post that someone else
yeah,
could
you're
do.
taking up a post, and it is a amount of stress.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Shame, some people have been sending Abdullah Al Kamil.
Yeah, he's posted them. It's fine.
Shame. Sorry about that, Abdullah.
International medical graduates who are doing an F2 standalone might find it difficult to provide all the evidence. Do you know if the colleges will take this into consideration? This sounds really blunt. They probably won't. They're going to want you to provide the evidence. You're a
crest
I am
form.
an IMG, actually. So hi, I'm an international medical graduate. So good question. I think that they take some of the evidence into consideration, but you have to have all your ducks in a row. Everything has to be, really specific. You have to have everything stated there. And you also need that CREST form, Certificate of Readiness to Enter Specialty Training. And that CREST form ideally needs to be completed by a consultant, which is a UK consultant. And they've gone one step further this year. They even want a PDF download of the consultant's details, GMC details. So with that said, if they're that strict with a UK consultant, if you're going to submit your home country, a consultant who filled your CREST form, I'm just not sure if that's going to be good enough. Yeah. With that said, though, they are accepting CREST forms from home countries, but you need to, I know in many other international countries, QI is not prominent there. So some people might tick that, their consultant might tick that they've done QI because the consultant themselves has never heard of quality improvement. And then when you get here, they ask you about your quality improvement project and you stumped, or they email or they contact that consultant and ask, oh, what was the quality improvement project done? And then that's a probity issue right there. So be very careful when ticking that CREST form that you've actually done everything on the form and that the consultant is aware of what each statement means, the home consultant.
So someone's written, are there less training places available for IMT this year? So I went to the HEE webinar and they stated that, yes, there are fewer places available, especially in London. I didn't look up the actual numbers, but it is on the IMT website. Overall, there seem to be fewer training places in general.
Can I just ask something else? It might be a little bit slightly off topic, but just in case things don't go as planned during the this application round, I know that a lot of colleagues are speaking about doing F3 posts. Is this a training or a non-training? How is this done?
So,
Sorry to be off
yeah.
topic, but
No,
I
that's
was just
fine. That's
wondering.
completely fine. So
Thank
an
you.
F3 is a non-training post. There are no training F3 posts, and basically an F3 is a year out as a senior house officer. You can take it in. Some trusts provide a great F3 program where you can rotate through things. So you can apply for the F3 program, and this basically means like they could give you 3 months in ITU, 3 months in A&E, 3 months in other specialties like cardiology, gastro. It just depends on the trust, and you can look for those jobs at on nhs.co.uk. And then some other trusts will let you do an F3 for the whole year. You can pick one specialty. But yeah, basically it's non-training, but you can still use Horus, which is what the F1s and F2s use, and you can still document, procedures you've done and your professional development plans, etc.
Great, thank you.
Sorry. Someone's asked why there are less training places available. So I've tried to figure this out myself. It seems that there are lots of people planning to do F3s, and there are lots of hospitals that are actually advertising jobs as fellow posts instead of as training posts. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think it's a combination of COVID making applications more difficult and also COVID making travel more difficult. So a lot of people are doing fellowship posts here. Generally, year on year, there is a strong move away from applying to training and a strong move towards taking an F3. 10 years ago, it was about 75% of people went straight into training. Last year, it was about 75% of people actually just did an F3 instead of going into training. I think people kind of value the freedom that comes with it.
Someone just said CREST will be for non-training posts. So no, CREST is only for training posts. And just for the rest of you who might have trained here in the UK, CREST is not needed for UK-based applicants. CREST is only needed by IMGs, so international medical graduates. And CREST stands for Certificate of Readiness to Enter Specialty Training. Sorry, I left out the T, which is training. So you will only need to fill this form in if you're an IMG, so not to stress anyone else out here.
Somebody's asked about working in a private hospital. Would there be advantages?
Another point is that, okay, just because I am an IMG and I understand what you're going through about you're in the process of getting GMC registration. So they're really clear on the GMC, on the application sites, especially for IMT. From the time of getting GMC registration, you need to have a year of practice after GMC registration, which ideally needs to be in the NHS if you're here, but it can be a year in your home country. But you need to have a year of practice, evidence of a year of practice by the time of the post start. So for example, if you're getting GMC registration today, from today, tomorrow until a year's time, you need to have evidence that you've worked in a hospital, some form of hospital. So I guess a private hospital might be fine. In terms of advantages, I'm not sure about that. Maybe the pay is better.
I know only one person doing exclusively a private job, and he seems to be fairly relaxed and enjoying it, but that's all I can really say. I'm really sorry. I don't know much about working in a private hospital. Cool. remember to let us know if you guys are interested in interview practice. There are so many interview tips and tricks that I wanted to go through that we just don't have time for in this talk.
Yes, please.
Great. We will post this on our Facebook, on our Instagram, on our Twitter. We will email you guys just to make sure you're all aware of it as well. And I'll show you our social media again. There we go. Great. We'll stay for another 2 minutes in case any other questions turn up, but otherwise we will end the chat in a bit. Thank you all again for joining and for being so great and interactive.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such a lovely and helpful information.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been really helpful.
No problem. If you do have any other questions, you can just email us at medicine.theessentials@gmail.com.
Medicine.the.essentials because
medicine.the.essentials@gmail.com. And just a follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then we also have a YouTube account. Yeah, so you can subscribe there.
What is our Facebook link? It should be on your screens. Am I that bad at Facebook computers? Can you see it on your screen?
I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Phew. One of these days, this is just going to break on me. Okay. Awesome, guys. Thank you all for joining. Feel free to leave whenever. I'll wait for everyone to leave to make sure no one has questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.